Hey, what's going on? YST here. Welcome back to another raid video. Today we're going to be diving into the top 15 epics in Raid Shadow Legends that are not void. You heard that right. We're going to be focusing on the Force, the Magic and the Spirit Affinity champions, and we're going to kind of talk about their utility and what kind of teams you may want to use them in. But without further ado, let's get into it. So guys, off the jump here, I just want to say that this tier list is not number 1 is the best and number 15 is the worst. It's just the top 15 that I believe have the most utility when it comes to the clan boss. And correct me if I'm wrong guys, if there's something that you like to use, I always want to see what kind of champions you guys like. But let's get into it. So number 1, you may have guessed it, is going to be Sepoka Sentinel. She is an absolutely amazing champion. Why? So she attacks one enemy and has a 40% chance, and you can book it up to an extra chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Decreased attack is one of the most important debuffs if you're not using an unkillable team. And Sepoka Sentinel, once we get to the rest of her kit here, so on the A2 places a 60% increased defense buff and a block debuff buff on all allies for 2 turns. What does this mean? You got the increased defense on all of your allies, and with the block debuffs you can block the stun, you can block decreased speed and all that stuff that you really hate, and you can make your team affinity friendly to face any kind of clan boss. So all you have to do is get her at a 4-3 ratio, as this ability is on a 4-turn cooldown, and you're going to be ready to rock and roll with this champion. And then on the passive here, we have a 50% chance once booked of blocking any incoming damage when an ally is attacked. This procs really nicely, especially on your stun target. So with RNG, if it's on your side, you'll be able to last a lot longer in the clan boss than you usually would if you are dying to the single target stun. And then on the passive here, increases allied defense in all battles by 25%. Overall, there is nothing to not like about this champion, and if you pulled her, congratulations, because she will help you out dramatically if you do not have an unkillable team. So at number 2, we're going to go straight into someone in the same faction, and that's going to be Doom Priest. Very situational champion, but also a very good one. So on an A1, nothing crazy, increased crit rate on a random ally for 2 turns, and then places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Really nice, increased attack on all your allies, going to increase your damage over time. And the passive is what you're using Doom Priest for, and she heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP and removes 1 random debuff from them at the start of this champion's turn. So if you get it to go first after each turn, so after AoE 1, AoE 2 and the stun turn, she's going to cleanse all of those debuffs off your champions, keep your affinity friendly, and make it a lot easier for you to face all of these kind of affinities on the clan boss. So especially if you don't have a block debuff champion like a Sepoka Sentinel. So at number 3, let's head into the Shadowkin next. I love the Shadowkin. What's your kind of favorite faction in the game? Let me know. I'm interested to find out. Tarogi the Frog. I am yet to showcase him. I'm currently building a team around him, but I don't want to bring it to you guys until I've made a completely new team. I don't want to keep showcasing the same teams, and it's really hard to move around gear with the silver situation and all that stuff, but it's coming out soon, so look out for it. But on the A1, attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Once again, decreased attack on the A1 is what we like to see. And then attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn, and the chance increases by 5% for each debuff on the enemy team. Guys, with the new AI skill prioritization, you can completely lock this out and just focus on the A1 and the A3, and you can just leave this one out the way because it doesn't really bring much to the table. Then on the A3, places a shield buff equal to 15% of this champion's max HP and a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. This is really good guys. Having ally protection on your team is completely busted when it comes to the clan boss. It will help you get to the further stages, which means more damage for your team. And then also heals this champion by 25% of their max HP and places a 30% reflect damage buff on them for 3 turns, and the heal increases by 2.5% for each poison debuff on the enemy team. What is there not to like about this kit guys? Ally protection, we got shields, we got reflect damage, you got extra heals and shields once you book this champion out, and it is on a 3-turn cooldown once you book it out. This is what you want to see on the clan boss, 3-turn cooldowns. We do not like those 4-turn cooldowns, and as an epic champion, really solid all the way around. And then on the passive, when attacked, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on the attacker for 2 turns, occurs once per hit. So if you take this guy into affinity, that is 2 big versions of the poison on the clan boss every single turn. Maybe not the stun turn if he's not the stun target, but for the AoE attacks, that is 4 poisons on every cycle. So overall a very solid champion. And let's get into the next one in the Shadowkin. So guys, it's going to be one that I don't have, and it's one that I haven't seen showcased, but on paper seems like a really solid kit. I do want to see teams made of him, so if you use Hatatsu, please join the Discord, show me your teams. I am very interested to see it. But let's get into it. Attacks one enemy and has an extra chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. I cannot express how much leech can help the early game, the mid game, and also in end game compositions on the clan boss, guys. It allows you to not have to use lifesteal. You can start using stalwart kits and reducing AoE damage. Leech is a very powerful debuff when it comes to the clan boss and keeps your team alive. And to have that on an A1, on an epic champion, not a lot of champions do this, but I will be getting into a couple later on. And then attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns, and you can book it up to an extra chance once again. Decreased attack on the A2, leech on the A1 is looking good so far. And then on the A3, 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, and places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 1 turn. This guy is absolutely busted, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong, but on paper this guy looks absolutely insane, and I'm kind of shocked that not a lot of people use him. So far, leech on the A1, decreased attack on the A2, increased defense and continuous heal on the A3, and in the passive, this is where it gets really juicy, but I want to see how he uses this. So removes 1 random debuff from this champion at the start of each turn. Then we'll remove a stun, sleep, freeze, fear, true fear and provoke debuffs for 4 other debuffs. The clan boss does not place any of these other debuffs apart from the stun, so if you put him as your stun target, he's never going to be stunned, guys, which means you do not need a cleanser. This is really good. And then on the aura, we got increased ally defense in all battles by 25%, which is similar to a Sepoka Sentinel, so very viable to use as your stun target. So there is nothing that I do not like about this kit here, and I do want to see him in action, and hopefully I can pull him and play with him sometime. But let's get into the next champion. Alright, so at number 5, once again, this is not in any kind of order, it's all situational compared to your clan boss team, but it's going to be Sandlash Survivor, guys, and she is, in my personal opinion, one of the best epics in this game. Overall, she is absolutely amazing in the arena, in the clan boss, in the faction war. She can help you 3-star. You get the drift. It's a really solid champion, and let's get into the reason why. So attacks one enemy 2 times on the A1, so really good for War Master procs, and it has a 30% chance of placing provoke, etc. We do not really care about this, but then heals by 15% of the damage inflicted if this champion is under any debuff, which is okay if you get debuffed and you don't have block debuffs. But then on the A2, this is what we use her for. Attacks all enemies and decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn, and increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. So this here, you may have seen some of my clan boss videos. I like to use Sandlash Survivor with Sepoka Sentinel because you can extend her block debuffs and her increased defense, keep you affinity friendly, keep that increased defense up for the entirety of the fight, and it's going to help you out getting into the further stages on the clan boss. Very solid, and it kind of ties into this passive here. Then places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns when any ally drops below 50% HP. So let's say you get to turn 30, your champions are starting to take a bit of a smack, they drop below 50% HP, and this passive is going to drop on a 4-turn cooldown, and also places a block damage buff on herself. So once the ally protection goes up, she's not going to be able to die either because she has the block damage on. So very solid passive. And then once again, we've got a hefty defense aura of ally defense in all battles by 25%. And just an honorable mention, I know we're not talking about voids today, but if you have this champion here, you may have guessed it, Godzilli Canary, very similar to Sandlash Survivor. As I said, I'm not talking about voids, I'm not going to go into a kit, but she is very similar. So if you have a Godzilli and you don't have a Sandlash Survivor, definitely use a Godzilli Canary. She is a really good champion. I just wanted to give that honorable mention before some of you guys say, what about Godzilli? Remember, this isn't a void video. So let's get to the next champion. So whilst we're on this faction page, let's head into Deacon Armstrong. Personally, I would say top 3, maybe top 2 of the best epics for clan boss in this game. And the reason is that not a lot of champions can allow you to hit the 2-1 ratio in the epic category and bring as much utility as Deacon Armstrong can bring to your team. So why is that, may you ask? Attacks one enemy 2 times, and each hit has a 30% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns, and you can get that buff chance up quite a lot. Once again, leech on the A1, allowing you not to use lifesteal sets. And then on the A2, attacks all enemies, has an 80% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense. You could book it up to a 100% chance here of placing it for 2 turns. So decreased defense on the clan boss, allowing your War Master and Giant Slayer procs to do extra damage. Then we lead into the A3, which is actually the one that you want to use before the decreased defense, depending on the composition that you're using. I do have a lot of videos including Deacon Armstrong, so if you're interested, go and check them out on the channel. But fills the turn meters of all allies by 15% and decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 15%. in the arena, kind of like a mini Lysandra, but it's the increase in the turn meter of all allies which makes this champion amazing, and then he grants an extra turn. Not a lot of champions do this. There is one other one that I will be talking about in this video. You could probably guess it, but stick around for that. And then if you run it with his aura of 19% speed in all battles, you can help your team get to the 2-1 ratio, very similar to like a Michelle, because it's only a 15% increased turn meter, so you do have to lead him. But if you have a cleanser like a Bad Alcazar, or if you're running block debuffs, etc., very viable to reach a 2-to-1 ratio team using epic champions that are not void or legendaries. So let's get to the next champion. Alright guys, so this next champion I'm gonna kind of do like a joint in together. So it's gonna be Steel Skull first. So what he brings isn't absolutely wow, this is insane, but what he does bring is really good at the same time. So attacks one enemy 2 times and has a 10% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. You can get up to a 35% chance. You may be thinking this is not the best poison in the game, but it does proc quite a lot in counter-attack teams and ally attack teams, etc. But what makes him really great is he has a cleanse on his A2, so he removes all debuffs from a target allied and heals them by 40%, well a 50% with the books, and it's on a 3-turn cooldown, so you can kind of cleanse up your stun target if you really want to, and then also has an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns and heals all allies by 20% of their max HP. Overall, very solid champion. The aura is nothing to do with Clan Boss, but the rest of his kit, there's nothing not to like about this champion, and he was actually one of the first epics to reach me a 4-key Ultra Nightmare, so that just kind of shows your utility. If you're in Nightmare right now and you have a Steel Skull, he could be one of the missing pieces of the puzzle to help you reach that Ultra Nightmare. Another champion I wanted to talk about that was very similar, kind of, is Aox the Rememberer. One of the best epics in the game. Once again, this is a top 15 video, of course YST, why are you being silly for? But A1, very similar with the poisons, which is why I'm putting them together. Attacks one enemy 2 times and each hit has a 10% chance, and it's a 30% chance once booked. So 5% less, but you get the same amount of poisons out for 2 turns. Not very reliable, but there is a lot of compositions that I've seen where he does really big damage. But what makes him a little bit different is he attacks one enemy and heals all allies by 10% of their max HP, and heals each ally by an extra 2.5% for each debuff on the target. So if you do some simple maths, that is a 25% heal on this A2 on a 3-turn cooldown, which is really hefty. Then on the A3, places a 50% decrease attack. Wind that back a little bit. Places a 50% decrease attack. This is not a hit, guys. This just places it, so you cannot get a weak hit. So if you're facing any kind of affinity, he's not going to be resisted by this as long as you have the right accuracy or that 3% chance that kind of sometimes may proc. Personally, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, but it's very reliable. I hardly ever see it get resisted when I use him. And then also has a 75% chance, 100% once booked, of doing some turn meter manipulation stuff and decreased crit rate, but that does not apply to the Clan Boss. And then on the passive, kind of like a mini Vizier or a Bulwark, he increases the duration of 2 random debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn when attacked, occurs once per hit. So if you're struggling to keep those debuffs up, having him on the team can kind of RNG your way through into Ultra Nightmare or Nightmare and keep those debuffs up a little bit longer and possibly boost your damage up over time. And then aura wise, increase ally accuracy in Doom Tower. Get out of here, we're not talking about Doom Tower today. So whilst we're speaking about Lizardman, how can we not talk about Jar? Attacks one enemy, has a 35% chance of placing a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. You could book it up to an extra chance. And then on the A2, places a 50% ally protection buff and a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. So if you want to make full use of this, you want to get him to a 4-3 ratio, but his base stats and his speed, it's not the best, so it could be really hard to get to, but if you can do it, it's definitely worth doing. And then on the passive, places a 15% continuous heal buff on an ally for 1 turn whenever an ally loses 20% of their max HP in 1 hit. So that's a pretty nice passive to have. And then on his aura, I'm not a big fan of the HP aura on the Clan Boss. It's always defense for me, but increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. If you don't have better, let's say you're a Nightmare and you're still running your KO, definitely a really good aura to help you get through the progression period on the Clan Boss. Alright, so one champion that I nearly kind of forgot about here was Seeker, guys. So let's head into him. You may be familiar with him from the Batman compositions. There's a lot of compositions that Seeker is involved with rush guards and 2-to-1 teams. He was the one that I said that you could use instead of Deacon Armstrong. Very solid champion, guys. I actually don't have him. Look at that. I've got almost every single epic in the Undead Hordes. I don't have a Seeker and I don't have a Vogoth, but let's get into his kit. So on the A1, attacks one enemy 2 times and has a 25% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. We do not care about provoke, but 2 times on the A1, really nice for War Master procs. And then on the A2, fills the turn meters of all allies by 30%. This is double a Deacon Armstrong, which is why you need to run the speed lead with Deacon if you're using him, and then places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns and grants an extra turn. This is what we wanted to see here. It's very important, not a lot of champions do this. And then on the passive, heals this champion by 20% HP and then places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns when hit with a critical hit, which is pretty nice, I guess. And then on the aura, increase allied defense in arena battles by 30%. This guy is very good in the arena, very nice in faction wars, of course very nice in the clan boss and many other areas of the game. So if you got a seeker, definitely could be one for your team. Tyrel, you heard it. This guy is the OG of Raid. I remember when I started this game around 2 to 2.5 years ago, Tyrel, when I pulled him, I screamed like it was a legendary because he was so good, guys. The people that's just joining this game right now, you don't realize how hard it was, and there wasn't kind of the information that there is now about the clan boss and understanding it. But Tyrel, when you pulled him back in the day, really solid, and even till this day I think he's very underrated because a lot of champions have kind of come out and replaced his position. It's not to say that he's not really good, because let's get into his kit. On the A1, attacks one enemy 2 times, really good, or placing a decreased attack debuff on the enemy for 2 turns, and the damage inflicted is proportional to defense, and he is a defense based champion. Hitting twice is better than hitting once when you talk about decreased attack. It's much more consistent, and it's really good to have on the A1. And then on the A2, attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance, 100% once booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns if the target is under a decreased attack debuff. Of course, you're going to be opening with that A1 anyway with the AI skill prioritization, but once again, decreased defense on the clan boss is very important when trying to boost up your damage, and it will also place a sleep, which is nothing to do with the clan boss. And then on the A3, you can kind of take this off if you want to with the skill choosing, but it does hit pretty hard, guys. I've seen it hit up to 200,000 if geared correctly, but if you want to remove this from the equation and you just want him to use decreased attack and the A2, you can do that now, which is really nice. And then increases allied defense in all battles by 25% on his aura. Once again, it's what we want to see on a champion. So definitely bring your Tyrel out of the vault if you think he's not amazing, because I tell you what, he really is. Okay, choose, guys. Which one am I going to mention? Of course, the only counter-attack champion that's an epic category in Raid Shadow Legends. Will they ever bring one out, a new one? I don't know, guys. I'll leave that up to Polarium, but I'd like to see it one day. Maybe one that provides a leech or a HP burn or something a little bit different. We're just gonna have to wait and see, guys. But as the pool of the champions gets bigger, the chance of getting a counter-attack will smaller. So hopefully a 10x event does come out with Skull Crusher soon, because he's one of the key components in reaching Ultra Nightmare if you don't have endgame gear or endgame champions. But let's get into it. So on the A1, we don't care about heal reduction. It's just about damage on that one. But then on the A2, places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns, and places the counter-attack buff that we all love on all allies except this champion for 2 turns, of course. And then places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn, so he can't die with the ally protection on. Works really good. And then on his passive, decreases the duration of all debuffs on this champion by 1 turn at the start of each round. So in sometimes when you get stunned, he can take it off himself, or if you get decreased speed, you'll be able to take it off himself. It's a really nice passive to have on a champion, and the aura, pretty good for faction wars, but that's not what we're talking about today. So Skull Crusher at number 10. Are we at number 10? I've kind of lost track, but let me know anyway. I see you guys just moping around that man-eater. Mention him YST. We're not talking about voids today, guys. If you want to see that, comment it below. If it's not requested, I'm not going to do it. If you want to see a top 10 void champion list, let me know. Then next up here, we've got Occult Brawler, arguably the best poison champion in Raid Shadow Legends when you talk about epics. Maybe even legendaries, but when you talk about just poison, guys, nothing else, Occult Brawler is that man you want to go and talk to. Look at the state of him, by the way. My god, I'd be scared to see him in a back alley. But A1 attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a big version of the poison debuff for 2 turns. On the A1, it's going to go up a lot, guys. Then on the A2, there's a lot of situational things, so you can remove debuffs or ignore defense, or depending on the different situations. I'm not going to completely read it out because it doesn't really apply to the clan boss that much. And then on his passive, we got a places a 2.5% poison debuff on this champion for 4 turns at the start of each turn. Has a 70% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on a random enemy for 4 turns. 4 turns at the start of each turn. This here is absolutely bonkers, and when you pair it with the A1, that is 2 poison debuffs near enough every single turn, and you can see the A1 is 2 turns and his passive is 4 turns. Insane, guys. So let's get into the next champion at number 11 or 12. I've lost track. Hopefully I'm on track. When you talk about the clan boss, guys, you have to talk about Farrick in the Fat since he came into the game. This guy should be a legendary in my opinion. He is absolutely insane, guys. You put him in your clan boss team, he's going to bump your damage up. He's going to bring everything you want to see as an epic. So on day 1, places a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Already, straight away, we like to see that. So if you don't have a Raz and Scarhide on your team, or if you just want to get extra decreased defense because your Raz and Scarhide isn't booked, it's a very solid choice for you. And then on the A2, which is what we really want to see, attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance, 100% once booked, of placing a HP burn debuff and 2 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns. So far we've got decreased defense, we've got poison and HP burn on the A2, which leads into the A3 of placing a 30% increased crit rate buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff on all allies except this champion for 3 turns. Then all allies except this champion will attack one target enemy on a 4-turn cooldown. This here is absolutely insane. Allows your champions to boost up more damage over time. You get extra crit rate so you don't have to crit crap your champions. This here is insane for an epic, guys, and to have the poison and the HP burn and then the decreased defense on the A1. Guys, he is absolutely busted. Arguably the best ally attack in the game, but they all kind of situational. I think Longbeard and him work together because Longbeard works with Weaken, he has decreased defense. Then of course you've got Kreela, which a lot of people like to use as well, so kind of just depends who you want to use really. Then on the passive, deflects 20% of all incoming damage this champion receives onto all allies, then the damage will be spread equally across all allies. It does hurt your champions quite a little bit, but if you build all of your champions tanky enough, this shouldn't affect you too much, especially if you're using counterattacks, ally protection or shields on your team. So yep, Farrick in the fat at number 13 there. So let's head straight down into the dwarfs, right at the bottom of the list, and Rizzo Jar. This guy, I haven't personally used him, but I know that he has a lot of utility for a lot of people coming up in this game. There is a lot of things to like about him, but the cooldowns on this champion is what I do not really like about him. So let's just talk about it anyway. So heal reduction, we do not like that on the A1, but then on the A2 places a block debuffs on all allies for 1 turn and places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. If you tune this correctly, you can kind of block the stun with the block debuffs, which is why I put him on this list. And to have an increased defense in the same skill, it's really nice, and it's on a 3-turn cooldown, so it makes it extremely easy to tune for your clan boss team. Definitely very viable, guys. I kind of do want to play with him quite a bit, but I've seen him showcase quite a lot in the past. And then has a 100% chance once booked of placing the decreased attack debuff on all enemies for 2 turns and decreases each target's max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted. So decreased attack, we've got block debuffs, we've got increased defense, and then a heal reduction on the A1, which we don't want to see, but the rest of his kit is really nice. And next up in this same faction at number 14, this champion here is really underrated, guys. If you pulled her and you're struggling on the clan boss, she is really good. She can bring a lot of things for you. So on the A1, once again, we've got a decreased defense on the A1 like a Farrick in the fat. And then we've got attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And then heals this champion by 25% of the damage inflicted. So decreased attack on a 3-turn cooldown. Not the best, but not the worst. But then on the A3, places a 50% ally protection buff and a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. So ally protection, we've got decreased attack, we've got decreased defense, and we've got an aura which we do not really like for the clan boss. Hopefully they can change that to something else one day. But overall, really solid champion, guys. It brings a lot of utility to the table. And this one's kind of going to be joint. So first one's going to be Animax. He's very situational. I've seen stuff like unkillable teams and rush guard teams and 2-to-1 teams, and also in kind of a relentless set. Animax is a really good champion, but not at slow speeds. I'll explain why. So decreased defense on the A1, which is really nice. And then attacks one enemy 2 times, 75% chance, 100% once booked, of placing decreased accuracy and a 5% poison debuff for 3 turns. So it's a 3-turn cooldown for a 1 poison debuff. It's not really insane, but it's still kind of nice to have, which is why I say relentless. And then attacks one enemy, has 100% once booked, of placing a weakened debuff for 2 turns, and also heals this champion by 50% of the damage inflicted. So overall, really nice champion because he's got decreased defense, he's got weaken, and he's got a poison in the same kit. And then on the passive, places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 75%. And then places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 50%. And then grants an extra turn when this champion HP drops below 10% as an active effect. So on paper, really nice, but you need to be going at a kind of fast speed to make full utility of his kit. And in the same spot, where is she? We're gonna have to head into the Skinwalkers, and it's gonna be Fane. And she's also really nice for progression. So attacks one enemy 2 times, each has a 35% chance of stealing the target's 10 meter. Doesn't really matter about the A1. But attacks one enemy 100% once booked, of placing 2 5% poison debuffs and a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Really nice to have in one kit. and then attacks one enemy 3 times. The first hit has a 75% chance, 100% once booked once again, 60% decreased defense debuff for 3 turns, and the second hit has a 75% chance of placing a weaken debuff for 2 turns. So decreased defense and weaken, we've got poisons and decreased attack. In an epic champion, what is there not to like about that? So Anax and Fane at number 14. And let's head into number 15 now. So it's going to be one of the 3 daily login champions, and it's Grush the Mangala. This guy is actually never been used on my channel before. I do have multiple of him. Why haven't I used him? Maybe I just haven't had a chance to yet, but definitely a really solid champion. So on the A1, so attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing that leech debuff. That I cannot stress how good this debuff is. And then on the A2, attacks all enemies, 60% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff and a 30% crit damage debuff for 2 turns. Really nice to have on the clan boss with a decreased attack there. On a 4-turn cooldown, not the best, but the leech is kind of the main utility for this champion. And then on the A3, attacks all enemies, places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns, and places an additional 7.5% continuous heal buff if at least one enemy is hit with a critical hit. And that's on a 4-turn cooldown, so this champion's not a real heavy damage dealer, but he's more about keeping your champions alive so you can get to the further stages on the clan boss. And then on his passive, increase defense in faction wars by 30%, because the Ogre and Tribe faction wars is really hard to reach to, but we're not talking about the faction wars today. So that's going to be all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comment section, did I miss anyone out that you really like to use? I am intrigued to find out. But that was my top 15 epic clan boss champions in Raid Shadow Legends that are not void, and I'll see you on the next one, guys. Peace.